The late people's poet James Matthews has been described as a mentor par excellence. The 95-year-old died at his home in Athlone in Cape Town on Saturday. The renowned writer and poet worked as a journalist for a variety of publications, including the Golden City Post, Cape Times and community publication, the then Muslim News. His protege and editor of Muslim Views, Farid Sayed, says Matthews has had an indelible impact on his life. Our reporter Vanessa Puna compiled this report.
Tributes continue pouring in for the late poet and writer James Matthews, who passed away at his home in Athlone at the age of 95 years old on Saturday. Described as a mentor to young writers, as well as someone who piqued the political consciousness of those around him, is a former colleague of his and also a close friend, Farid Sayed. Farid, good day to you. Of course, we were chatting just now about James Matthews and also the impact that he's had on your life as a writer, as a journalist, but you're also talking about the legacy of James Matthews. When we reflect back on his life, what comes to mind? How is he best remembered in his capacity as that struggle poet, people's poet, as is often referred to?
Yes, indeed, a radical, revolutionary voice at a time when those voices were suppressed, and he didn't give up. The legacy, for me personally, of course, you mentioned music lover, etc. Nina Simone will always, when I think of Nina Simone, when I listen to Nina Simone, I'll think of James Matthews. But in terms of the legacy, I think the legacy is when I spoke to him about the poem on Imam Harun that he had written, Patriot or Terrorist. And he says, Farid, that poem is all about defining yourself. Don't let the oppressor define who you are. And so even in the democracy era, when there wasn't a clear divide between the oppressor and the oppressed, but of course there was still this huge inequality. But in daily lives, people felt oppressed. And he would speak at schools, he would speak at groups of people, pensioners, for example, and his message was, define yourself, be confident about who you are. And I think this is what came through. And hence, black consciousness was a big thing to James, because black consciousness gave us, during the period in the 70s when I was made contact with James as a reporter, it gave us that confidence. We were not second class, we were not non-white, we were black. And hence I think black consciousness was a central point in his life, because that is what he believed in. He said, recognize your own worth. Don't let others define who you are.
We talk about, we delve into his writing and his style of writing, and you've described it just now as something raw. The anger at a system which he felt was grossly unjust, for example. Young writers at the time that have come through, through James Matthews, that have learnt from him, how has that impacted, I suppose, and shaped journalists, reporters, writers, and even perhaps had an impact on the way people, perceive their realities in the context of his writing?
Absolutely. So James's writing, as we said, it was raw in the sense that he expressed what was deep inside. So even the title of one of his anthologies, Black Voices Shout, The other one was Cry Rage, So there was a lot of anger, but it was an anger that was managed through his writing. He expressed it through his writing. So it wasn't this kind of wild anger, and I'm, sometimes anger can actually lead you into depression. No, his anger, drove people to action, the activists. But I think, what one must remember is that rawness in his poetry appealed to the ordinary folk, It gave them courage, when they read the language that he used, So his poetry wasn't something fancy and obscure. It was very direct, So when, one could say either raw, it was direct, it was the real lived experience of a person. So ordinary people could really identify with his poetry.